Hello everyone, welcome back to the SAP Manufacturing Consulting channel. We will see today one of the most important master data for procurement, which is basically an object called PIR. Okay, it's basically purchasing info record. We don't need to confuse with the PIR or peers for plan independent requirements in planning. Okay, this is another object. This is basically, again, it's a purchasing info record. It's basically where the information or relationship between the material and the vendor exists. Okay, basically we will have a lot of data that it's required for a purchase order to be created. We can supply that data from this object. Okay, so we will have, for example, specific lead time, right? Instead of taking the master data from the material master data, we can pick it up from here. For example, for one specific vendor and one material, we can have a specific lead time. The same for the price, cost, right? Or the purchasing price, I would say. We can put it here as well. Okay. Even though we do have other objects, we will see in another videos, which is in higher hierarchy with precedence over this one. This will be the basic one. Okay. If we don't have the others, we can have this one, and we can pick up all the data from there. Okay. Okay. Let's see it in action right away. Okay, to create a purchase in info record, we need to go to MA11. We put the supplier here. I just need to find it because I have this one here. It's already saved in my buffer. And for the material, I think, yes, this is the one. This is the limestone in bags we need to purchase. We will put the purchasing organization, and we need to put the plan level. Okay, this is at the plan level. I mean, it's the supplier, the material at the plan level for certain purchasing organization, of course. Then we need to pay attention to this category because we will be creating this time the standard one. But for other future videos, we will be reviewing other functionalities such as subcontracting, pipeline material. Okay, when we have a kind of tube that we will receive this product, right? Can be oil, can be some fuels, can be other things, and water as well, and consignment. Okay, we receive products, we store it, but we do not consume or pay, or I would say we do not pay for it until we actually consume it. Okay, so basically these are special ones. For these three special ones, this is mandatory. We need to create info records or purchasing info record for this one. However, for the standard, if we use others, we might not need it necessarily, or we can just create it in the background. Okay, for example, in the Allen agreements, if we create an agreement, we can do the automatic creation of the info record, or we can do an update of the info record when we update the Allen agreement as well. Okay. Okay, so we do not put any data here. Okay, because the system will create it automatically and will assign it. Okay, let's press enter to jump to the second screen. Okay, so in the first screen, we can see some supplier data specific. Again, remember that this info record is a relationship between one specific material and one specific vendor. Okay, the same material with other vendor can have different values. Okay, or the same thing for other vendors, right? So we can have different lead time, for example. Okay, so and different, of course, other parameters, as you can see here. The supplier, I will just mention the ones that are kind of more used. Okay, for example, supplier material number. Okay, this is important because sometimes in the purchase order you need to send the supplier code. Okay, so let's assume that for this one they call it line 100. Just okay, just saying something, right? Um, then they have other values here, other other things that we can use, as you can see, but they're not mandatory. Okay, this is one of the most common for the supplier data, which is a specific supplier material number for this product. Okay, so for our company is raw dash lim, okay, as limestone, and for them can be this one. Okay, then origin data, we can put some certificate here. We will see this in functionalities for QM, but we're not going to be covering in this video. Okay, we will deal with these origin data here and manufacturing, etc. So for other purposes, the supply option is also you can consider here for regulatory purposes. Okay, but this is not common unless you use the functionality for that. Then this is important, okay, because we have the conversion for the order unit. So in this case, the order unit is coming as a kg because the basic unit for this raw material is kg. Okay, so we can have a conversion, and the vendor can have a different order unit. For example, we can order in pallets. For example, maybe the vendor is not going to sell us anything different than one pallet, two pallet, three pallets, etc. Right? So in that case, as long as we have a conversion unit in the material master for this raw material, we can put another order unit here. Keep in mind, you need to put the order unit here plus the conversion in the material master. Okay. Okay. So let's jump to another uh, specific screen. Okay. This is the general one, I would say, but we can go to the purchasing organization data specifically. Okay. Here comes the price. Okay. So for example, let's go to the control first. We can have the plant delivery time. As I said, we can change this to a specific one. And this can be as specific as only for this raw material and this vendor. Okay. Maybe the same vendor for other raw materials can do it in 2 days or 10 days, but this one is in 5 days, just for saying something. Okay. The purchasing group, standard quantity. Normally we would put here the total amount that we might want to purchase. Okay. Just an estimation, and or we can just put unlimited here. Okay, so let me put just a value here, 10,000 kgs, for example. Okay, we can also put the minimum quantity if there is any requirement for this vendor. Okay, maybe the vendor will not sell us less than, I don't know, for example, one pallet that it's equivalent to 500 kgs, for example. Okay, and that's another functionality we can use. The shelf life is also it's coming from the master data, but we can change it here for specifically for this case. Okay, also we can assign shipping instructions. Okay, we will do that for other purposes, but not this time. The same for tolerances, right? We can have kind of a under tolerance and over tolerance. It means how a percentage, I would say, right, of the total quantity you requested, and if it's going to be accepted or not, if it's below that or if it's over that. Okay, typically we can put 5 or 10%. Okay, but of course it's part of your kind of a decision, right, of the company decision to accept a little bit more, or you cannot accept less, but you can accept more, for example. Okay, we can just put something here just for the sake of as an example. Okay, you can, let's say, adjust this to your specific requirement. Okay, and there are a lot of things like tax codes as well sometimes needed. Okay, you can put it from here, maximum quantity, etc. Okay, so you can have a lot of things here defined. Okay, and there is also another, before we jump into the conditions, there is another flag here, which is important, I would say. This is in S4HANA specifically, the outsourcing. Okay. When we want to have a kind of control of the master data that we are creating for procurement, normally you have a segregation of functions, right? You have a procurement department, for example, and a purchasing department, or the planners, the material planners can be purchasing, right? You segregate the functions of actual procurement, which is basically dealing with the vendors, defining the vendors, right? Selecting vendors, qualifying vendors, let's say blocking vendors, all those functions, right? From the management perspective of vendors. And we can separate from the actual purchase. Okay, so if procurement is defining the vendors to be, let's say, used, right, the planners will be purchasing, but without choosing which vendor they can purchase to. Okay, that's the key part of the segregation of functions. Okay, so basically, with the outsourcing, we will be doing the following. There is a new approach, a simplified sourcing in S/4HANA that is not requiring the source list. Okay, we will see the source list in another video anyway. Okay, because it's another approach. It's the old approach, but it used to be, depending on the company, it used to be very useful. Okay, because it's a list where you can see exactly all the options you have to purchase from, right? And you can be blocking, and you can do kind of a fixing the one you want, etc. Okay, so in this case, this is a simplified version to avoid that master data. And if you flag the auto source, the system will determine this as a specific source for a purchase order. Okay, so if you have for example, a purchase requisition, I'm sorry, a plan order, or you need to create a purchase requisition, right? Automatically, depending on definition by the MRP will take a look at this, and it will assign this vendor, okay, to the purchase requisition. And of course, the purchase order will be using this supplier. Okay. If it was not determined at that time when you are creating the purchase order, you will need to define the supplier, of course, right? So that's part of the source determination, regardless in what stage you are determining the vendor. Okay. So we will use the outsourcing. This can be done also at the online agreement level, which is the other higher level, I would say. But in this case, we're going to be flagging this here, okay, because we want to purchase from this vendor this raw material. Okay, so let's jump to the condition. This is a very basic one, right? It's basically we will put the price here by certain numbers of quantities. Okay, so when we want to use more decimal points, we normally tend to use, instead of 1 kgs, we used to use 100 kgs. Okay, so for example, if we want to, let's suppose it's the cost will be 1 point, right? Let's suppose it's 23.8, right? We cannot put 3 decimals here, right? But if we put 100, right, we can actually multiply by 100, and that's going to be 12.38. Okay, so it means that 100 kgs will cost 12.38 cents of euro. Okay, so with this way we can keep this other decimal. Otherwise, if we put just 1.23, we will lose the 8, or we need to round up to 4. Okay, so this is one of the ways we can use this to have more decimals when it's needed, of course, right? If you just have a random round up number, let's say, you can use just by kgs, right? For example, equipment cost, I don't know, for saying something, 1500, right? You just type in 1500 per each equipment, right? Each unit. But in this case, since this is just a commodity, right? Normally the cost will be low. Okay, so you need to increase this field to use more decimals here. Okay, that's one of the way we can use it. For the conversion, the same thing. We can use a quantity conversion in case there is a need of conversion. Okay. In this case, we will need just 1 to 1 in this case. Okay. Then you can have other information here that can be used, of course, for printing in the purchase order, etc. Other usages that you can use. But basically, these are the most important ones. Okay. The same if you need the acknowledgement, right? If it's required or not, etc. Other functionalities you can activate. Okay. So remember that we have this control and conditions under the tab, the other tab. This is the general tab. This is the first one we cover first, as you can see. Okay. Then you have conditions. Basically, is the amount we put, right? And we can have some kind of a validity periods, okay, for that. So we can go back to the header, and we can go back all the way back to the purchasing info record here. Okay, so these are conditions that we can also use for different periods of time. For example, the price can change in summer for some reason, right? And also we can add text here as well. But basically, these two are the most important ones: the purchasing or at the purchase organization data and the general data. Okay, so let me just save it, and that's it. This is an info record. So again, the most important usages will be for creating a PO. The system will pick it up from here, and for source determination as well. Okay, for MRP, I mean. Okay, so before we finish, let's try this out. Let me go to MA51N to create a purchase requisition. Okay, and we will see if the source is correctly determined. Okay, so at the purchasing requisition header, you need to flag this as a source determination. Okay, so this will activate the functionality for that, even though we can do it in another screen. I will show you anyway. Okay, so let's put the raw LIM for limestone. Let's assume we will purchase 1000 kgs, for example, and we will define the delivery date, I don't know, next week, for example. Okay, so storage location will be determined automatically. I have assigned the storage location for raw materials at the material master, and the vendor, everything should come with the source determination. Okay, so I'm not going to add any other data here in these columns. Okay, yeah, okay, I'm just going to press enter. There you are. So we have a source, a supply determination automatically executed in the background, and it's opening it at this tab. Okay, you see the vendor. That's the vendor we created the our agreement. I'm sorry, the info record for, right? So this is the info record number we just created, and that's it. So we have the vendor. So the system knows what storage location will be received, the vendor number, purchasing organization, the number itself of the info record. Okay, and it's picking up the information we supply there. Okay, so it's more okay. Can delivery be met? Well, just because the date, the delivery date we assign. Okay, so we just confirm. Okay, and let me just create this one. Okay, let me check if everything's fine. Yeah, no messages. Excellent. So let's save it. Excellent. So we have now, we can just MD04 if you want to see it there. So it's 1000. So it should be here. This is the one we created. Of course, it's given us an exception. We don't need this one, right? Because we have plenty of stock. That's fine. It's just for the sake of understanding that the vendor was correctly determined. Let me just open the vendor column here. See the right vendor description, okay, for this purchase requisition. So either way we can, in this case, just cancel it, right? It's flagging it for deletion, or we can basically create a purchase order from there, okay, from this one, or we can just, as I said, we can flag it. Okay, let me just do it because we don't need this one. Was just for the sake of assigning the vendor. Caution, yes. Remember that purchase requisitions line numbers and PO line numbers can only be, let's say, flagged for deletion. They're not actually gone. Okay. Plan orders can be completely removed from the system. Let me just save it. And that's it. Okay. So we shouldn't see it anymore. If I just refresh here, it should be gone. It's gone. Excellent. Thank you for watching the video. If you like it, please give it a like. Please share, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Make any comments in the video, and you can suggest new videos, new functionalities to be shown here. And any question will be more than welcome. Thank you.